Hello and welcome. Thank you for spending this time with us, and we really appreciate it. And also, if you're watching the recording, then hello and welcome as well. It's great to have you. So I've been really excited about this event this afternoon, and particularly because we're able to actually partner with two of our partner schools, the Rivers Academy and Leo Academy Trust. So I'm going to introduce us now to our presenters. I better start with me. So I know I've seen a lot of familiar faces on the call. I recognize a lot of you, so you may well already know me. But if I haven't met you yet, I'm Rachel Dunne from Joskos Solutions, and my background is in primary teaching and change management for digital learning. And I'm super thankful to be leading on education at Joskos Solutions. And if you haven't heard of Joskos Solutions before, we are an education company who focus on using technology to empower learners. So would love to talk to you more about us if you haven't heard of us before. Now, amazingly, on this call, we also have another Australian Rachel, Rachel Coathup. So Rachel is from Leo Academy Trust, where she's the lead teacher of technology for learning. She is a whiz at all things EdTech. Leo Academy Trust focus a lot on Google for Education and Seesaw. If you don't know what that is, I'm sure Rachel will talk you through that later on. And she's also put together this amazing program called Badge EdTech. And what this does is it actually enables you to go to this website and find all these great EdTech applications, training and certifications that you can use to really expand on your skill set, on your tool set that you use with your students. So would recommend checking that out. Rachel, did you want to sort of introduce yourself and what you do on a day-to-day basis at Leo Academy Trust?
Yeah, so I think it's worth to say that I started at the Leo Academy Trust during the first lockdown, so during April. So it was definitely the height of digital learning just being sort of pushed forward. And my role has changed sort of over time. It started with a big training influx and just trying to train educators up with various different EdTech tools. And then we've sort of obviously eased back into school for the autumn term, and that moved to a coaching role. So it was really going in and supporting specifically Year 5. And really working closely with the teachers one-on-one to support them in utilising and enhancing their teaching and learning for their pupils. And then obviously things have changed again, and we're sort of back into distance learning, which is now sort of just continuing to support teachers, but also we are both a Google reference school and a DFE EdTech demonstrator school. So I know that I've seen some of you are on the call, are already part of the program. And if you're not part of it, then I definitely recommend signing up just to get that extra support. I've been on 2 calls already today, just being able to help out other schools within that. And one of the other things that we rolled out in September was Seesaw. So Rachel mentioned that before, and that has been just a wonderful success to see the progress that our little children have made on using Seesaw. We had 6,000 posts last week on Seesaw just for the first week of distance learning. So that was just amazing to see.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Rach. And we are also joined, actually, what I should also say is it's Rachel's birthday today. So thank you especially for giving up your time to share your knowledge with us on your birthday. And hopefully it's fun for you as well.
It always is.
Good. The other expert that we have on our call is James Radburn. And it's been amazing working with James recently, because he's just been super inspiring in terms of his looking after the digital strategy at his entire his entire trust, and it's a big trust. I think they're sort of at the beginning phase of implementing what is going to be an incredible change journey using technology. But it's wonderful to have him joining us today. So James is from Rivers CofE Multi-Academy Trust. He leads on digital learning and computing. He's also got an incredible YouTube channel, which has loads of videos on Microsoft Teams and Seesaw as well. So definitely worth checking out. But James, did you want to introduce yourself, maybe share a little bit more?
Hello. Yeah. Whenever someone says introduce and what your role is, it's kind of expanded over time. And as Rachel said then, we started from what was a small academy trust, and we've grown and grown and grown. And across this year, we're even going to add, I think, another 4 schools. And you can see how change management with that is a challenge in its own right. And so I started predominantly last year. Before March, I was class teacher 4 days a week, and that kind of built up and more. And so I look at all of the strategy. I look at we've implemented Seesaw, we look at the infrastructure. So not only is part of my role training and teaching, I teach in earlier, so I've just been in there this afternoon, and also look at that, how the infrastructure, how the strategy, how we have digital champions in each school, and how that all fits together from an education point of view, but also from that change management and strategy point of view. So lots and lots of moving parts, and from schools that are being very reluctant in using technology and putting them into a place. I think actually during this remote learning time, it's been a fantastic opportunity for us as a trust to move forward and see this vision and what we are doing there. So yeah, been part of doing quite a lot of different things at the moment.
Awesome. So we are going to be hearing from James and Rachel throughout our session. So I'm just going to take you through what we're going to cover this afternoon. So we're going to have a little welcome activity so we can see who we've got on the call, so we can learn a bit from you. Then I'm going to be sharing some sort of high-level tips on what we've learned from online curriculum delivery from our Joskos schools, and also from our own experience and research that's come out recently. Then James is going to take us through sort of how he's been working with his trust to adapt the curriculum and their pedagogy to this online environment, with a focus on maintaining positive staff and student wellbeing, and also keeping that social aspect that's a little bit more challenging when doing things online. We're also going to try a little activity. So we're trying to break it up. If you've been on my sessions before, you'll know that I usually try and involve you as much as I can. So we'll have that before we head into Rachel's section, where she's going to be sharing on her ideas and apps for setting tasks through your online platform, whether that's Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, and perhaps also a little bit on online curriculum delivery. And then at the end, we're going to share with you all the resources that we have covered during the session. So we've actually got a Wakelet, so it's like an online space where we've put all these things, including the slides. So you're welcome to access those afterwards. And yeah, if there's time, we'll also do a Q&A, but you are welcome to ask your questions throughout the session using the chat. We will do our best to sort of answer that when we're not talking, so just pop them in there. Also, just to mention, if you stay on till the end of the session, we'll also share a form with you. So if you fill that in, you'll receive a CPD certificate for attending today, and also a Joskos digital badge. So like I said, pop in the chat any questions that you have. We do want this to be sort of interactive. It'll be great to hear from you all. So with that said, the first thing that I would love to do is this little activity. I actually took this from Rachel's slides, but I know it's used a lot in schools, which is basically for you to have a look at the GIFs and share which one you can identify with today, and then just pop that number, put that letter into the chat. We've got a few so far. So yeah, which one do you feel like? And then just add that letter in. Amazing. Oh, just noticed a few other names that I know. Amazing. Bit of a mix there by the looks. this is a nice little activity that you can use with your students when you're sort of starting a lesson, just to have a little check-in with them without having every person have to unmute and explain how they're feeling. You can just have a nice little overview. Quite mixed. We've got some people feeling fairly positive and others that not so much, but I think that's very understandable given the crazy time that we're in. If you don't mind just muting your mic just so that we don't have background noise, that would be awesome as well. Okay, thanks for being involved in that. I'm going to now ask you to be involved in something else, which is our Padlet that we're going to jump into. So if Mark, if you don't mind popping that into the chat, or if Rachel or James feed into it, that would be great. So if you haven't used Padlet before, it's a great tool, online tool that enables you to collaborate with your students in the same space. You can share pictures, links, images, photos, images and pictures are the same thing, GIFs, all those sorts of things. So feel free to join in there. And then we've popped some questions and some stimulus in there for you, so we can hear how you've been using your, how you've been sort of delivering your curriculum to your students. It'd be great to hear from you. I'm just going to jump over there too. So basically all you need to do is click on the link. Awesome. Thanks all of you who are already adding in there. So if you haven't used this before, I've made this Padlet into a, what's it called, like a column one. So you've got the question up the top and then you can put your answers in below. And there's a few different questions that go across the top there. Oh, normal timetable, awesome. Wow. Got some schools using Google Classroom. We've got a PE and IT teacher. That's something that I haven't seen go together before. That's awesome, Becky.
I think one of the things that's coming up with some of the challenges looking at it is the infrastructure and the challenges that comes with it. And I know I may touch on it a little bit later, we may do, but that's a lot of what we're doing now with remote learning. It's not a short-term fix, it's a long-term strategy as well. And it's something we can dive into later. And that's kind of where my roles come from, looking at long-term strategy. And then it's kind of COVID is force that agenda forward in some ways as well. So it's good to see we're all in the same boat, quite a few of us in the same boat with that, but there are ways of moving beyond it. And so it's quite exciting for us this year to see working with Joskos where that is coming. So we came on board from September, our whole trust, and it's been a really good process, like putting things in place that actually we've got some really good plans, and I'm excited for the future now.
Yeah, I was just going to come in and say, I think it's really important to sort of, having worked with many schools around the UK, I think it's one of those things that we need to think, okay, well, what can we do right now? But actually, this is going to continue, and ultimately to have that success, we need to sort of actually even rethink our own school strategy and where that technology sits into it, and try where we can to support that issue with device access and Wi-Fi, especially at a time where we know just how important that is for them, you know, not just for the learning aspect, but also just that community connection that's so important when we're in the current position we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Both really good points. And thanks everyone who's shared. There's a really nice bank here. It's interesting to see the different challenges, and I think if you see something that you agree with or that's also relevant for you, you can also click on the like button, the heart button, so that you can sort of, in a way, vote, so we can see which ones are common across schools. But I'm also interested in people saying things like the steep learning curve has been a challenge. And absolutely, I think teachers have been trying so many new things within such a short space of time. So it's amazing to see how far we've come, but I think that we can all agree that there's still a lot to learn. But what I'm quite excited about, and James sort of said this, is that what we're learning now, or what schools are sort of trying now in terms of online applications, that this isn't just, don't think of it like this is just for remote learning, or this is just while we're in this time of school closure, even though schools aren't, we can see schools aren't that close, there's people sitting in their schools. But it is going to be things that you can use actually going forward. And I think Rachel and James and me would agree that we were using these tools well before COVID was a thing. So it is a way that you'll be able to teach your students in future. So think of it as an investment. Based on the gifts, so I've got some tired people there. I guess the good thing about doing a remote session is that you can probably be doing this sitting on your lounge or relaxing somewhere a bit more comfy. If you haven't yet joined the Padlet, the link is in the chat. You can find it there, but really interesting what you've popped in here. I'm going to, just because of time, jump back into the slides, but feel free if anything comes to you during the session, or if Rachel or James share something that makes you think, oh, I should have put that down, then feel free to come back to this as well. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to get into is our Joskos Top 10 Online Curriculum Delivery Tips. So these are sort of things we've learned during this time, also from when I was teaching my students remotely as well. And after I go through these, just a heads up, I'm going to be asking you what your sort of top 3 would be. So just be mindful of that. But also, if you think of something that I don't cover that's been super important for your school, then note that down as well, because I'll be asking for other ideas that you have. So the first one is that you're a great teacher, and teaching remotely doesn't change that. One thing that I guess has worried me a little bit when I'm speaking to teachers in schools is that they feel completely, some teachers feel completely out of depth, like they need to, learn everything all over again. But actually, they're great teachers, they're amazing teachers, and all the things that you do and you've learnt through practice, like modelling and formative assessment and summative assessment and your questioning techniques and all the things that make you a great teacher, you can still use all of those while you're teaching online. It's just a matter of adapting it and finding tools that enable you to do that more easily, and hopefully you'll pick up some of those in the session as well. My next tip is that it's great to give yourself or your staff time to learn, to practice, and also to share. And one thing that I just want to say, because I know this sometimes happens in my sessions, is that even though we may be sharing a lot of different applications today and different ideas of things you could use, don't feel like you need to go ahead and try every single one of them out straight after the call. Maybe have a think about a few select ones that will be right for your curriculum and your students, and then try one at a time, so that you're adding to that bank without becoming completely overwhelmed. And then the other thing is, I just encourage you to join an online community. I know it's made a big difference for me. So whether that is Twitter, I know I've seen a few people on the call that are big education Twitter users. If you haven't used education Twitter, then I recommend joining. We'd love to connect with you there, but also other spaces. And one thing that I'm really excited by is that Joskos are actually going to be creating our own online community of teachers. So stay tuned. We'll be sharing more information about that with you. You know what I mean? So yeah, we'll keep you posted on that. But it's a great way to be able to know that you're not alone and be picking up ideas from other educators. Also, when it comes to thinking about new applications to use, just from my experience, I'd recommend you using apps that you can sign in with your Google or your Microsoft account, so that you don't need to remember a whole new username and all those sorts of things. So the ones that we're demonstrating today, you can, which helps keep things simple for you. So the next tip is to bring your parents on board. And what I've seen with schools that I've been working with, I think Sir Thomas More were one of them, is that they've been able to share videos, help guides, even do like online training sessions for their teachers. Sorry, not for their teachers, for their parents, so that they understand the expectations, they understand how they can also support their child at home, how they can, open up the assignment with their child, go through the feedback, all those sorts of things, and just to help them feel part of that community. I know right now I'm not a parent myself, but it must be such a crazy time for parents to be working and also supporting their children at home. So hats off to all parents if there's any on the call. The next tip is to set engaging open-ended learning tasks. Now, this is something that as a good teacher you would always be doing, sort of providing students opportunities to use different thinking styles and to be able to demonstrate their learning in different ways. One thing that sort of I will admit that I've seen when I've jumped into schools, Google Classrooms and Microsoft Teams, is that they've sort of been using the assignment section as like a way to share basically a digital like worksheet with maybe some fill in the gaps or, those sorts of things. So let's just not forget all the, important things that we know about teaching. And actually by using online technology, we have more opportunity to have some of these more high level options for the students by using really interesting tools. And I think Rachel's going to show one of those later on that I'm fairly excited about. So tip number 5, make your online lessons interactive. Now, I don't know if you've seen, but recently Ofsted brought out some guidance sort of from research they've done on what's been working well in remote learning. And so one of the comments said, live lessons aren't necessarily best or something like that. And I was a bit shocked because if you know me, I'm like all for live lessons. But having reflected on it a little bit, I can understand that for schools in areas where maybe students don't have a lot of access to to devices or to connectivity, then perhaps pre-recorded could be better in that case. But also for schools that are having lessons that are more like a lecture or just the teacher, very teacher-led, then in those cases, well, actually, what's the difference between it being live and pre-recorded? So what I would recommend is making your live lessons really interactive. So you've got that instant feedback coming from the students. You're able to engage with them in that live way. And that's where the lessons, are most effective. So I've popped a few of the tools there on the side that work really well. And I've also popped in just an example of how I structured my live lessons when I was working with students. So just some ideas to help you think, how can we really make the most of the time that you have with the students in that online environment. Okay, tip number 6, personalize the learning activities. As a great teacher, you already do this. You know your students so well, your students know you. Only you will be able to create the best sort of learning for them. I'm not saying that you need to sort of create every single resource yourself, but if you are using, for example, online video lessons from Oka Academy or things like that, then it's always nice to sort of top and tailor it with a little bit from you. So for example, having a little bit pre-recorded of you introducing the lesson or a live section, just so that they know that you've chosen it for them and it's designed personally for them. Also in Microsoft Teams and in Google Classroom, you have the ability to go ahead and select the individual students that the assignment is going to go to. So you can sort of really adapt it for the different students that you have. And then if you've got any questions about those sorts of things, other training sessions, we can go into more depth there. So no stress. Tip number 7 is chunking your information into bite-sized pieces. Again, as teachers, we know that students aren't going to sit there for an hour and just listen to us talk to them. So it's using those same skills and understanding that we of student sort of cognitive awareness that we already use, and just adapting that into an online space. So I've just popped an example in here from a colleague called Emma Pass, who's actually a secondary teacher in a hybrid school, and I've popped a link to some of her content at the end of this as well. So she's just given an example there of how she might break up sort of her live lesson structure, but it's the same idea with when you're also giving students new content for them to complete in their own space. And I think, Rachel, you're going to touch on that when you go into Ed Puzzle. There was also some interesting guidance that came out about this and some research. So I've just popped that link in there because, again, you can take this slide and you can go into that at the end. Oh, we can hear some laughing. If you're unmuted, might need to mute, especially if you're having a little laugh. Okay, we're almost there. Tip number 8 is around sharing meaningful feedback. And I'm actually not going to go into detail on this because I know that James is later on. But this is something I was super passionate about even before COVID, was that we have technology and we have the ability to be using it to make giving feedback sort of less of a time-consuming burden on teachers, but also to be able to make it more engaging for students to receive. So things like listening to it and seeing it on video, etc. So I won't jump into that too much though. But rubrics in Classroom and in Teams is another way that we can sort of make that feedback more specific. Then tip number 9. So providing high-tech and low-tech options. We know that not all of our students have access to a laptop or a computer during the whole learning day. So providing options can be really helpful, thinking about applications that are easier to use on a smartphone, but also thinking about setting students' work through your online platform where they can actually submit a photo or submit a video instead of having to actually complete it in that on a laptop. But then also thinking about your students who perhaps are able to really fly with technology and could maybe produce a video or some really cool content that they're able to do because they have that technology. So just not limiting them. And in other training sessions, we can go into more depth on sort of how you can push them there. And the last one, enabling opportunities for group work and collaboration. As a teacher who's always used EdTech, it is so amazing to have students working together online, and there's no reason why that has to stop because they're working at home. So just a few ideas here, using collaborative docs, having students create quizzes together, having students in a Jamboard space. Rachel might talk about that later. And yeah, just being able to continue working together, even though they're not sitting together in the same room, is still very possible, and can also be good sort of for mental health and having that social aspect. So those are my top 10. Would love to now hear from you about what your top 3 are. So could you select your top 3, and you can just pop the number or the numbers into the chat, or can you have a think about what other tips you might recommend that you've learned from your school's experience that you could share with us as well. So either pop them into the chat, or you can even tweet them if you have Twitter, and then you can also tag us. It would be great to hear from you and to see what you've learnt during this time. 5, 9, and 10. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. No one's had the same so far, so that's interesting. Eight's been quite popular though. Oh, Becky, very good point. Teaching mute protocols at the beginning. Yes, I think have all of us made that mistake. The second lesson was perfect after the first lesson was a disaster with students not knowing the expectation to mute. I think most schools have got there now, which is good. We've all got our students, you know, nicely in shape with muting every moment they're not speaking. Oh, I like that from John. In year one, our kids love to start the day with a joke from the teachers. That's nice. I'd like to start the day that way. Thanks all for sharing your ideas and for your thoughts on that. That's wonderful to see. I'm over on my time by 5 minutes, so I am going to hand over. But the last thing I just want to say is just be kind to yourself. We're all learning. I know there's a lot of sort of overwhelmed teachers right now, but the fact that you're on this call, that you've given up your afternoon to think about how you can support your students even more is so important. And well done you. Be kind to yourself. So I'm now going to be handing over to the wonderful James, who's going to take us through some of his ideas. So over to you, James.
Hello, I do apologise. I'm going to be like they do in Downing Street and say next slide, please. So Rachel, make sure you're listening.
I'm ready. I'm so ready.
Don't worry. I've also just had my children shouting in the background. So you saying about families and everything. I was on a call with heads last week after Boris Johnson's meeting, and my wife was doing Zoom yoga, and I had like my 6-month-old I just about got down, and I had my 3-year-old on my lap trying to like read a story to him while talking to 14 head teachers about remote learning and the procedure we've already got in place. So I do apologize if he comes up on screen, but yeah, he is playing downstairs at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to be taking that. Yeah, we've had one already today. I'm just going to take on the next level then, looking at how we can adapt what we provide already, our curriculum, and the pedagogy we do as a teacher, and use that in the online environment. Now with EdTech, there is so much out there, but I think what you need to kind of go and think about are your principles. What are the key things you want to go with? And all of you have already kind of prioritized there perfectly. You've got different principles. And that's fine. And that's what you need to do. You need to personalize it for your setting and all of those different elements of it. And on the next slide, you need to make sure it's really clear we have those expectations. What are those minimum expectations? So the DfE guidance, they're 3 hours a day on average across the cohort, with less for younger children, and Key Stage 2, 4 hours, Key Stage 3 and 4, 5 hours. And yes, we can replicate the classroom, the traditional classroom online, but also, is that always the best pedagogical sense? Some of those things, yes, we can replicate, but how can we enhance using technology for feedback and make our life easier, and especially with workload and well-being of staff and parents and children at the moment? And I know lots of teachers who are parents, and they are trying to not only teach their children, they're trying to sort the children out in class, and juggling those can be tricky. So there are lots of different elements, and I kind of was thinking about all these different priorities and elements we have within this, but I've kind of put it down to 2 to kind of hone in our ideas. And I think that's a key thing, to hone in what are your priorities, what are your key things you want to come out of this today. And I put them as 2: community and content. In that community, you've got all different stakeholders. You've got the pupils, you've got their parents, you've got even the idea of what devices they have at home, and the teachers and the TAs and the head teachers and SLT. And part of it is making sure everyone is on the same level. They know what they're doing. They can actually all engage with it. It's also checking with their well-being, but also how can we work smart together within this? Because schools are a community. I had someone asked me the other day, do you think traditional schooling will disappear? And I was like, the key part of school is to create that community. And we know children need those boundaries. They need to know the timetable. They need to know the routine of school. And I think all of this will help us enhance what we're doing within school. And it's been the push that the education sector is needed. But community is at the heart of every school. And if you go back to I bet your principles of what your school logo, slogan is, and for us at Rivers, it's love, learn, live. Community is at the heart of that. And I bet community is at the heart of all of yours. And so within this time more now than ever, we need to make sure we have that community together, however we do it. But then you've got content. And I think content's the bit where we can be struggling at the moment, where technology can make the biggest impact, the way we can replicate, but also enhance and transform what we're doing with technology moving forwards as well. And it's how do we combine these two to provide the best that we can for our children. And I think it's very dangerous when you compare what you're doing to a school down the road, or a school across the country. You've all got different infrastructure, you've all got a different setup, you've got different staff, knowledge, and so forth like that. There are certain things that we couldn't have implemented because we didn't have the even staff devices. But at times, okay, yes, we have to be we have to be aware of that, but we do need to push forward. And so like Rachel said earlier, we've implemented Seesaw as well after trialing it in a couple of schools, and I've been pushing the bandwagon of it for a couple of months. We saw in the first lockdown, the use of those two schools using Seesaw, we had 99% attendance in the first lockdown and engagement. Dominantly, and the children who couldn't access it, whether it was a device issue or they were ill, and actually making something that's accessible helps. And on the next slide, one of those things about community and content is I created a video, and there's Rachel. I'm just going to say Rachel's, the collective Rachel, Australian Rachel's. I don't know if there's like a collective noun for it, but I put up a YouTube clip, and it was all about top tips for Seesaw. Now, we have implemented Seesaw. We started it fully from September, but we have been using it for months before. And it was like, how do I get this image, this idea across to not only children, to also staff, and also to parents? And even though I implemented training, you don't know about consistency. And as I alluded to earlier, we're 14 schools big, and actually delivering training to that many schools within our academy can be a strategic challenge in its own right. But this video is now seeing about 4,500 views, which for a little person doing a YouTube clip is great, but for the big boys is nothing. But it means that I know people have watched this, they've actually seen it's useful, and it works for our situation. I've made it open so anyone can use this and be accessible to all, but it's sharing those expectations with parents. And I think that's some of the biggest barriers you will have, and the biggest problems you may get during this period is parents' expectations as well as everything else. And so going back to the strategic point of view, I want to just quickly share this SAMR model before I show you how we can implement it. And I've put there's a link at the bottom there to a blog post, but I'll just go through the 4 levels. And you may have seen this before, and it may be, okay, why am I going about strategic points of view? But I think it links really well in how you deliver online lessons, because you can't jump to the last resort. We've got to think about this as a layered approach. And so it starts with this idea of substitution. Tech adds a direct tool substitutes with no functional change. So that is kind of talking over your PowerPoint so it's accessible for all the children to access at home. There's no problem with that. We need to use that. We need to have that within our curriculum. And actually, if we didn't have that at the moment, no children would be able to access our teaching. So that is kind of a starting point. But the next thing is augmentation. How can we enhance it? So it could be talking over sections of it. It could be you could deliberately do a 5-minute section and chunk that information. It could be worksheets, or it could be other key ideas that children can respond in their own way. And so you're taking what was the traditional classroom lesson and providing a few more options for children to respond with video or with pictures. And that is the idea, where you're modifying the task and you're getting another layer deeper. Can you get, it doesn't mean that children have to use pen and paper, but it can do. for if I'm in a year 5 and 6 and we were talking about, okay, seesaw or teams, it doesn't really lend itself to long form writing for children. But I said, why are we focusing on using a tech tool in that situation? We can use pen and paper, take a picture of it, and the children can then perform it. If you're writing a speech for someone to perform, yes, it needs to be written, but then why can't we perform it? And why can't those videos go online as well? I saw a lovely video yesterday of a dance routine they did in PE, and this child came up with their own and was almost teaching the class. So she shared that onto Seesaw, and then that's actually gone on. It's modifying what was a traditional PE lesson into something that wouldn't have been possible without the use of technology. And this is where, when we redefine it, we can think about new ideas. How can we enhance those lessons? How can we have that interaction, and how we can have that collaboration? And so enhancing technology through substitution of augmentation is needed. It's our first step. It's the way that we should start. But then we can think about transformational change. And you may think we're on different levels. You may think, okay, we're substituting at the moment our lesson delivery. That's okay. But what is the next step for us? How does it do? And I think this is a good model for you to think about. Let's not think about all these different elements and all these different pieces that are moving. Let's go back to the theory. Let's go and simplify it. And how can we get those layers deeper? And the next slide kind of shows in how this kind of looks within a lesson. So I've put looking at structures, and we've kind of, Rachel alluded to it earlier, with different ideas. So we can think of, be aware of the home circumstances. Children, not depending on devices, they're not all going to be able to access at the same time. It's completely different for secondary and primary, depending what digital skills they have as well. If the children have got those digital skills already to join into a Teams meeting or Google Meet meeting, if you're doing it live, fine. But we know quite a few children won't have that levels of skills yet. And that's why I think making sure it's accessible to all is really, really important. And I think that's one of the first and one of the biggest barriers that we need to overcome as a school. How can we make that technology or that lesson accessible to everyone? So it is all about a balance. How can we balance our approaches and all of these different elements to produce something that is effective, it is clear, and it can support all children. So therefore, for our staff, I created something like this next slide. And on this slide, this is based on ours, and it kind of evolves through time, but you can do something very similar to your staff. And it's basically a one-stop shop for staff. They can pick it up. It has all the pedagogical things and ideas that I'm going to show you next. I'm going to dive into it, but it all goes into it. And the whole point of it is generic. Though, even though I put a few apps and say you could do it this way, all of these ideas on here are generic to whatever platform you do, because the way I'm particularly looking at it is actually, let's get feedback right. We don't have to type things, we can record audio. If we're doing lesson delivery, we know children's attention span often use the idea it's their age +1. And so if you're looking at reception year 1 child, well, their attention span, are they going to be able to listen to a 20-minute lesson? And it's balancing that quality against like that content of talking to each other and that well-being of that participation of seeing their friends as well. And so not only use examples from you, but use external examples, and having time for daily messages where they see you as a teacher talking. So in reception this afternoon, we had a quiz. Everyone was on Teams. We were all together. It was a fantastic opportunity. Even cut up my guitar, and we had a little sing-song at home, and everyone did wheels and bus, adding verses in and everything like that. And that is part of it. That's part of it. So we're not necessarily doing live lessons for all our classes, but what we are doing is having those well-being chats, having those elements to enhance the provision, and ways of doing modelling or and quizzes as well. So hopefully that's kind of the strategic overview where we've come from. But I think it's a balance of approaches and clarity over what you're doing. And so hopefully I'm going to show over the next few slides some practical tips that you can go away and take. So this is principles of instruction. So if you haven't seen this on the side, this is from Roche Science Principles from Teacher Head and how they've done it. And it's also, and it's key things. It's things that we know as a teacher, 5 material and small steps. Can we provide models? How can we check for understanding and guide students? And so with this music lesson, I cracked out my guitar, we looked at rhythm, we went through something, we sang something together. And you can, and it's a brilliant way of interacting with students. It's something that actually I can use that again and again, that video. And it was a perfect idea for a lesson that when I shared it, I can share it with all my colleagues. And so it's not just for me, it's for all of them. And they've got then a high quality of someone who kind of knows what they're doing with music, to come up with something, but use the expertise of teachers across your school. And so I can share it. And with this idea of providing material in small steps, on the bottom right, you can see what would be almost a traditional PowerPoint or presentation you go in class. And it kind of gave you the information on slide 1, but then slide 2, it was an interactive element for children to complete themselves. And this was very much a guided approach after a video or introduction from the teacher about what to do. And it just went over those steps. So the child could do the first activity, move on to the next bit, do the activity, move on to the next bit. And it's breaking things down. We shouldn't be throwing out our tools of pedagogy that we use in the classroom. Let's think about how does this look in the online environment, and actually that will stand us in good stead. Now I put Ed Puzzle there because I know, Rachel, you're going to go talking about that later on, and I think that is almost the next level, and I think that would be the next layer deeper, and how we can enhance it with that. And so the next slide talked about modelling, and modelling is really important, whether it is teacher standing into the room, and that's how we do often modeling. But I often use my iPad, a pile of books. I've even got a stand here that I use. I've got a stand, iPad stand, that I often put it on and put it over, and I'm talking over here. It means the picture's really clear for the students to see. We often do this for phonics, well, not the iPad stand, but we do phonics, and we model really clearly those sounds to children. And it's the same for doing maths calculations. The one on the right I've used to explain everything. On the right hand side, you've got the steps. Left hand side, I can color code, I can record it, and it's a video that could be played again and again and again. I had a year 6 colleague who told me that they had an EAL child, and they used this idea of explain everything, or even notes on your iPad, or even Jamboard, or whiteboard for Teams. It doesn't matter what platform you use, but the principle is that they created a quick video of them doing a mathematical task like that, breaking it down, and an EAL child just played it 5 or 6 times. That in the classroom is not possible. You can't go to that same child in the classroom 5 or 6 times, because you've got another 29 children at least who you need to look after. And so therefore, in a traditional classroom, they would be left behind. Whereas if we're using technology, they could play that 5 or 6 times. They followed it through step by step until they were confident. And actually, they were able to achieve as much as anyone. And I think through this remote learning, it will surprise you about the achievement of some of your children. The children will blow you away, because videos allow them to replay things. But be careful, be aware that what you're sharing with children is viewable, it's easy to access, but it's also clear. And that clarity is really, really important. That video on the bottom was how to solve it was like a magic square, really simple idea. 30-second video was a lot clearer than me trying to write the instructions down for them to follow, or whether to even do it by me talking on screen. So think about your lessons, think about your activities, think about the best way to model and share those so all the children can achieve. But then we go to the next layer. How can we provide feedback? And I'm going to be coming back to this in a second for you as well. And we're going to use something called WooCat, which I often use in my presentations. We have at the top left almost traditional marking, where you can tick and go over and mark. There is time and place for that. And actually for maths in particular, that is really important. And we've got the same up there. But when I was showing my CEO the other day and head of school improvement, the power of verbal feedback, and they were blown away with it, because we know research says if we look at it, verbal feedback to personalise, the children get it, but it's actually 10 times quicker for a teacher to click a voice recording, record something and give it back. And I don't know, it was one of the slides earlier, Google Docs have this now built in with an app, which I can't remember what it was, Rachel.
No, I'm going to touch on it soon.
That's fine. I thought one of you had. That's why I thought I'll plant the seed there. But verbal feedback is such a powerful tool. It's not only easy of use as a teacher. Children love listening to you talk, and it's so quick as well to give. You don't have to worry about decoding, and sometimes it's quite hard to put feedback into words as well. So that is a quick time-saving tips. Not only traditional marking like that, again, verbal feedback or testing. How do we know children understand what they're doing? And so quizzes is a really good way. And on the next slide, I've shown you a few different apps that you can do. I know like Socrative is built into, if you use Shobi in your school at all, or Quizlet quizzes, or they've even just the people come up with Spelling Shed if you're in primary, or Math Shed, they have their own quiz one now. And it's a really, really quick way of checking what do children know. You could do it at the end of a unit, you could do it in the lesson, it could be really simple, it marks it for you, it gives you data. It means that you can go and choose those children. Which ones do I need to go and look at? Which question did the class not get? I know within, you've got this in forms, you've got it within teams as well, and it's all of these different ideas. And feedback through online quizzes is a very, very powerful tool for the data you can get from it. And all of these are free, and that's the beauty with most of these tools. You can go on, create an account, and there's a lot of options with there as well.
I think that's one thing I can't imagine us going back on. Like, can you imagine asking your students to go get a piece of paper and, write down the answers? I think having them do it so instantly and you being able to see their answers, but then also being able to collate that later, that's a massive way that I think we've progressed as teachers during this time.
Definitely. And they are so easy to create. You can create them on the fly, you can adapt them. And have a look at the platforms, but for different, like I know Coathup has been a big one, but the danger I had with Coathup was that it's gamification of it, and the data you get from it wasn't as powerful as some of these others. So it has its time and place, but a lot of these have quizzes already made for you. It's not like you have to plan it from scratch. So you can go on there, use one, adapt it, and think of how it's relevant to you as well. And I think it's one of those easiest things to pick up for people to use. And then we're talking about balances of approaches. And so on the next slide, we thought about actually for our schools, we know the devices at home. We know there's a whole range of devices, and we don't want children in front of the screen all day. And we thought very carefully about that. And so this is basically 3 different ways children have responded to a maths question we gave them. And there is no problem with any of those responses. We've used the technology, we've used it to help us with the modelling, with the explaining and making sure it's clear and giving the task to the children. But then what technology allows us to do is allow children to respond to make it personalised for them, thinking, okay, what am I most comfortable with? What's the easiest method? What tool should I use for this situation? And I think that's the beauty of technology. We can gather all of those in. And for me, now I've got a clear picture or something interactive, I can go and mark those as I would with those ideas I had before. So when you're thinking of giving tasks to children, think about how you're going to get that work back. What do you want to see? Is it flexible for children as well? Because one thing with Seesaw, I know in particular, is that if you did a template and you did a worksheet on there, it's very hard for quite a few children, if they're not using a tablet, to write over a worksheet. And so thinking about how that comes is really, really powerful. So the last few things from me, personalisation. I think this is a time that we could send work out to the whole class, great. But what about Joe, who is struggling and we know he won't access it? Or who about Sophie, who actually has speech and language and she needs that weekly catch up? And I don't think we want to lose those children. And I think that's where the gap in education is. But what we're doing and I know you probably all are looking at and concerned about those children, we're just doing interventions with them by using technology, keeping those things going, keeping those elements that we're keeping on top of them, making sure that they are still continuing with their learning. All of these platforms, as I think we mentioned it earlier, you can differentiate work, you can share extra stuff with them, you can support them, you can provide extra elements to it, where if possible. But don't forget about those children who may feel left behind, those children who may struggle. And it's those vulnerable children that actually we don't want to be left behind within technology at all and how we do it. I just kind of want to finish on a couple of two things. And I read this in this book. Human connection with someone who cares about you is indispensable. You may be doing not live lessons, and we're not doing live lessons across our trust. Predominantly, we're doing other elements because of where we are, and that's the decision we've made. But what is really important is that community. The children want to see you, they want to hear you. And so putting your voice out there, putting your picture of your face when you do an explanation, but having those wellbeing chats, whether it's a small group, whether it's a whole class, whether it's a quiz, whether it's something else, they are really, really, really important things. And just by a teacher just saying your name, the children will actually feel grounded, they feel safe. And I think that's something we can't lose. And that's the biggest thing I'm pushing. I'm making sure we keep that up. And therefore, I think the last thing I've put on is keep it achievable. There's an awful lot of things out there, and think of it as a layered approach. Don't start gunning and going at the top. And I think the best thing at the end of any session that I usually run, I say, what are your 3 takeaways? What's the thing you're going to implement tomorrow? What's the thing that you could implement next week? And come away with 3 things from today that you want to look at, you want to implement, you want to use. And with that in mind, I'm just going to put a link in the chat. I'll come to the support bit actually before I do the link in the chat, because I'll forget that. I created support for our teachers because I know it came up with a few of these ideas earlier, that how can we support teachers who are not confident? And yes, we've got to push them, but we've got also somehow got to support them. So I created a SharePoint site where I've got links, and I've put the link on everyone's laptop on the desktop, so they can't say, what is the link, James, to the SharePoint site, which I keep getting. And I put it as visible anywhere we can. But it's bespoke to our academy. It's bespoke to what our children, how we're using things. And as I said, there are lots of things out there. Let's hone it down. Let's focus on those key few things. So I've put some videos, and the videos that are relevant to other people, I put them on my YouTube channel and just honed it down. And actually creating this on Google Sites or doing it on a SharePoint site, very easy to share within your and just embed all those videos. But what I'm going to do is just put this link in. If you've never used WooCat before, it's a fantastic little fantastic little online polling. So I'm just going to share my screen, Rachel, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So hopefully you can see that. And if you click on the link in the chat or go to that website, just going to put this first question up, and it says, which of these have you used for giving feedback to children during remote learning? So it'd be good to see. You can select multiple options, and as you click on these, we can see it live. So a lot of people using verbal feedback, got a few using online quizzes, written feedback. Video feedback's an interesting one as well. So there are different ways of doing it, whether it's you talking. The other great way I've done it before is going over children's work and actually recording a video of me highlighting elements on their writing, if it was that way, or whether maths work, and say, have a look at this one, have a look at this new digit in particular, what mistake may we have made from there, and visually showing them that way, which you can then replicate what you've done in the classroom, is interesting as well. So we've got a whole range of feedback there. So looking at that and looking at the answers you've put, I'm be really interested in this next question. And it's hopefully come up with a new question that says, which methods do you want to use to enhance your feedback to children? Do you want to use video chat? Do you want to use something else? And I didn't restrict you to choose those there. You may have some other ideas or how you would do it. So if you can type in there, you hopefully be able to put a few, it'll come up as a word cloud, I believe. So
while you're doing that, I was just thinking one of the ways that I really liked using video feedback was not just for individuals, but actually after you've marked a piece of work, sometimes you can spot sort of trends between how different students have actually completed the task, and you can then provide a video that's giving sort of that more generic feedback, but you can go into the specifics. So it's not as time consuming as making 30 for one assignment. You could make one, but actually the students, it still benefits them from seeing it.
I had that question the other day and we were talking about this, and it's kind of what you would just do in a traditional classroom. You pick up trends from a maths lesson the day before you start your next lesson with it. And we discussed about exactly what you just said, Rachel, creating one video, making it as like an activity or an assignment and just sending it to those children that it was relevant to. Some of those misconceptions you may pick up for everyone, but some of them you may just want to pick up on a couple of children to make sure they don't miss that sequence of learning in particular. There's some lovely ideas in here, recording messages, personalised voice recordings. I think it is a layered approach again, working out what would be the most impactful depending on your platform you use as well. But most of these platforms are quite they're very good at sharing these things at the moment. So hopefully you found that useful. Hopefully it's taken some of the pedagogical points of views with the curriculum, and I know Rachel will carry on now with going through a few more examples from that and go over a few different ways of doing that feedback in particular, but especially with Edpuzzle.
Amazing. Thank you, James. That's the first time I have seen WeClap in action, and we'll definitely be using it again. So thank you. Over to the other Rachel.
Thank you. So I'll just pull in my slides. I must say that I've been having meat problems all day. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will actually work. So I'm just going to present my whole screen because I just think it's not going to come through otherwise. And it'll save me having to switch back and forth constantly as well. So I'm going to take you through, I am sort of conscious of time as well. So I will go through quite a lot. So please do recognise that obviously you will have this recording to go back to. So if there are sort of anything that I go over way too quickly and you need to sort of go back to, you'll be able to do so as well. So I know that we sort of briefly touched on using forms, and James mentioned that before in terms of using forms for assessment and for quizzes. But I wanted just to sort of bring in that aspect of when we're thinking about rethinking the tasks that we set for our learners, that actually one of the nice things to be able to do is to both use them for fun check-ins. We had that scale at the start. Now it might be that you choose to do this as a way prior to joining your Google Meet with your class to develop that community, because you can see at the bottom, I know it's a little bit blurry, but it says need anything or an additional comments. So it gives children that chance to actually ask and share prior to joining in. And then just on the right, I wanted to share sort of another way that Google Forms can be used for in terms of not just using it as a quiz, but actually also using it for your lesson context as well. So being able to include the video of the tutorial that you're showing them during that lesson, and then having those specific questions that you really want to check in on during the lesson. And I know that for some of our children and some of your children as well, devices will be an issue. So they will be accessing their work via a mobile, for example, and Google Forms is a really great way to be able to do that because it's so accessible to go through and scroll, watch videos directly on there, and also to answer those questions. And I think, you know, as James alluded to, that feedback is so important. And when I first started delivering distance learning, one of the things that I quickly did was to take all of the reading comprehension tasks, and rather than just simply send home the same old reading comprehension texts that were available, I turned them all into Google Forms self-marking quizzes. And what was nice about this was that I didn't actually specifically go in and have a correct or an incorrect answer, but I did put that answer in there so that actually if parents or children were going back through their results, they could actually see if they got it correct or not. So it was a really helpful way to be able to manage that as well. And one thing, I know that James talked about the SAMR model, and when we talk about substitution, I think that there is this sort of that aspect of taking a PDF or a worksheet, and actually sort of taking it to that next level and being able to provide that interactive quiz where you may sort of change those types of questions. And what you can see at the moment is a little add-on to G Suite, which is called our Auto Magical Forms. And what it's actually doing is it takes a PDF document. So these are just Twinkle resources, and I've just added them into my Drive, and it will open it up and it will convert it automatically into a Google form for you. So this then obviously streamlined that process of having that text in that children could read. Sometimes I actually would read the text, so I would record myself reading through the text and then put that video in for them to respond to, and then they had those questions. And I would then use my feedback time that obviously if I was to go through and manually mark or go through and correct work, it would take much longer than being able to quickly set it up as a quiz and do this. So I definitely recommend, and it's been, I think, my sort of highly rated tool that a lot of schools have come away saying, I need to install that right now. So the next one that I'm going to go into is Edpuzzle, and I know that we have someone from Edpuzzle on the call, so I'm sure they'll be able to help with any questions. But again, I just wanted to show how easy it is. Now, this is using a YouTube video to be able to stop that video and ask questions. Now, one of the benefits of this is that you're not just sort of limited to only using YouTube videos. You can even upload your own videos and add those points along the bottom of your bar where your questions come in. Now, one of the benefits of this is actually when we look at pupil engagement and trying to engage them in their lessons, this is a fantastic way to do that because they've got that meaningful feedback that happens straight away. And the video is paused. So the video won't just keep playing until they've answered that question and it moves on. So it's been one of those tools that's sort of really changed the way that we issue that video content, especially if you're using just solely recorded videos or you're using a more flipped approach where you want the children to access a video prior to a live drop-in session or a live session and giving them that chance to actually go through and answer. And as well, another little sort of quick win is actually that we often see, especially in secondary, a lot of secondary head teachers will come to me and say, we're doing recorded videos and none of the students are watching them. And with Edpuzzle, you can lock the video. So students actually have to watch the entire video and they will have to answer those questions. And it's even smart enough that you can't just minimize the tab and walk away. You actually do need to be watching that video or it won't go through. And not just that, but you do have a huge database of assessment and feedback that comes through. So you've got things like how long the child spent watching that video, how many questions did they get correct at the end as well. And you can also obviously flick through to see this on a student by student level. And you can see where they sort of got those questions wrong, how long it took them to go through, and also to be able to provide instant feedback. So again, this is just a really easy one to be able to utilize as you go through, especially if you're using any kind of video content or recorded lessons as well. You know, I know we've all sort of touched on that aspect of the importance of videos coming from your teacher, and actually this can be a fun way to sort of check in to see how they're doing. You know, do they have any questions? And you've got that immediate feedback that can come in. You don't sort of have to issue them a video in the morning and wait until, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hoping that they've accessed that video. And as well, I wanted to sort of do a big shout out because Edpuzzle have just announced. I logged in this morning just to sort of check that everything was all good, and I noticed this little pop-up come up. So that was quick to sort of see this. So that you can actually get pro access to Edpuzzle for your entire school in the UK right now. So you just need to fill out that form. It is directly linked in the slide. So Rachel or James, if either of you can pop that link in directly into the chat, that would be wonderful, so that anyone can access that as well. And then the next thing that I wanted to touch on, and I know this is Rachel's favourite tool, and it is Flipgrid. And the reason that I wanted to sort of just share this is that it does empower pupil voice. Now, because I've been having meat problems all day, I'm not even going to try to play these videos, so you won't actually hear anything. But what they are is children were actually going through, and I'm just going to, let's put this one on. So the children actually recorded these videos, and it was a debate that they were doing about why Athens is better than Sparta. And it was really nice to just be able to give them that opportunity where they couldn't actually engage and create that debate aspect in the classroom, but also because they were able to do this by recording themselves. And we know that some children aren't comfortable recording their face and being on video. So Flipgrid gives you the option to just simply record the audio or to record the screen as well. So this was just done simply recording the screen. And again, with this one here, the child was actually going through and you can see that they were using Jamboard, which I'm going to come into in a second. And what they were doing was actually going through and talking through the maths work to explain it to the rest of the class on how they could solve it. So it was just great to see that opportunity to empower pupil voice. And there's so many ways to do that. Now, if you haven't had a chance to try Flipgrid, I have set up a topic that you can respond to. Now, you obviously don't need to do this now, but you may like to go away and have a go at using it. So again, that ability to screen record as well is such a fantastic feature that rolled out just after the summer. And again, being able to not only give children that ability to record themselves and their screen so they can have side-by-side image of themselves, and this just takes you through that process. The other nice thing that you can see being highlighted here is that Flipgrid is built in with a Microsoft Immersive Reader. So for any schools that are G Suite based, you may not have seen it before, but it does then allow all of that text instruction that you'd usually give for the assignment to be read aloud and also translated and also to be made more accessible to all learners as well. So this just goes through a quick little video showing the process of uploading, being able to trim videos, sort them out and screen share as well. And you can see that side-by-side mode. And it's super easy for children to be able to get on and to record their responses, but also to build in that digital citizenship aspect that's so important to share, where children have that ability to go and comment and respond to each other's videos as well. Okay, so I'm going to jump into Moat, and I'm very conscious that I'm slowly running away with time. So for those of you and having heard James talk about feedback before, we spoke about that aspect of voice feedback. And Moat allows you to do this in G Suite. So it can be both in docs and slides and directly in Google Classroom as well. So you can record yourself giving feedback. And again, it's just a 1 minute 30 video audio recording. However, you know, if you think about how long you might spend giving some quick feedback to a child, you wouldn't usually spend a really long, detailed period of time giving that feedback. And they have that aspect to listen to you and take that feedback. But also, if you're using this directly within Google Classroom, that if you press and hold the little Moat icon that you can see in that bottom corner, this then allows you to bring up your Moat book, which is essentially a collection of all of your audio voice notes. So if you are giving more general feedback, so for example, I can see that you haven't uploaded your work today. Do you need any help? Can I help you in uploading it? So you can save those when you need to use it again. So that's a really great way to be able to do that. And also this has just been added into Google Slides directly, which means that if you're providing audio instructions, anyone that uses Seesaw currently will know that you can add audio instructions in. However, this is something that's, you know, is so important for children, especially in Key Stage 1, where you want them to be able to have access to that. So I'm going to just jump into Jamboard now and just briefly touch on this because, again, one of the big things that we've seen for teachers from early years through until secondary is that importance of being able to not only annotate and directly add into what we're delivering as teachers, and this is a great way not only to build in that collaborative aspect as well. So Jamboard's really helpful for that. And you can push these out via Google Classroom directly in the same way that you would with Google Docs or Slides, and make a copy for each. So for example, all of our maths lessons are now done directly via Jamboard. So children have that essential digital space with physical manipulatives to work through. However, if you're not doing that, you could set up just like a slide or a PowerPoint where you set up a different template for each group to be able to access. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in very briefly just to show you what Jamboard looks like. So you can see here that you can go through and set backgrounds, and you can now go through and actually select an image to go as your background. So you might be looking for something that they can annotate directly on. So for example, if I was to go in with a world map and to find out where everyone is from, I could set this as the frame background, and I could then ask the children in the class to go through and use the pen to show where they are from. And it's just a nice way to build in that aspect when you're delivering your lessons and collaborating through as well. You've also got things like sticky notes. So I can say, I was originally from Perth. And again, it's just a nice way to quickly highlight on the map as you're going through. As a teacher, if I was delivering either a live lesson or a recorded lesson, I can use that laser pointer to sort of nail in and try and identify that aspect there. And I just wanted to very quickly sort of jump over, again, some quick examples. So going into using a text analysis piece of work, this is just some quick samples of our maths task, but always differentiating that where you're not just working on that one tool, but you're giving them opportunities to go away and find, using scavenger hunts is one of the things that we love doing. So it's, you know, and it's super easy for them to draw and annotate directly within this. So I know there's a couple of questions earlier on about explain everything. Again, I think it's always coming back to that pedagogy and those principles around what do you need the tool to do, and are there other ways around that as well. So I am going to jump into our last thing, which is where you're all going to, oh, I've lost my slides. So I was going to put up the collaborative slides to get on. So I don't know, Rachel, if you can bring them back in. Otherwise, if someone can just share the book creator code to be able to join. So if you haven't used Book Creator before, having worked in a prep school, so working with secondary, we were able to go completely paperless through the use of Book Creator to create almost like that digital exercise book aspect. So if you haven't used it and want to get on, this is an opportunity to get hands-on using Book Creator. So you can just join and access this. So again, this is that idea around being able to collaborate and work with your children and learners together. So there's that join code at the bottom. Now, one of the great things about Book Creator is that it's really easy to embed other content. So things like getting children to respond to a Flipgrid topic and adding in your Edpuzzle video can all be embedded directly into Book Creator. So you don't have to worry about them having to click on a link, open somewhere else. They can actually access that all directly via Book Creator. When you go up to the plus at the top here, you can see that you've got comics. So if you set the book up as a comic, you do actually get some ability to go through and add panels in, and you can go through and add media. Now, what I thought would be great to do is to find a page, add a page into the book, and just add some top tips that you have for improving staff well-being or improving your own well-being. So I'm going to go into images, and I can just do a direct Google image search, but just a couple of things I'll call out is from that icon, you've obviously got that ability to go through and add in Google Maps. You can also add in any files. You can directly add from Google Drive. And as I mentioned, you also have that ability to embed. So most apps now all allow you to have that embed code. So things like Wakelet, Flipgrid, Edpuzzle, the list goes on, YouTube, etc. So you can add all of those videos and things in directly, and these will embed on. So I love exercising. And one of the things that I think is really important when we think about well-being is actually just that importance of movement. And, you know, I think for a lot of people, when we are just sitting at home all day, I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like, you know, I just want to get up and just start moving. So I can go in, I can add in some text, and I can say that one way that I love to that I set an alarm every hour to get up from my desk and move. Now, there's extensions and things that you can use to sort of trigger those alarms, but you also have that ability to use the voice recorder. One way that I love to improve, and what you'll see is that as I do that, it'll transcribe everything that I say instantly. So when we think about accessibility and making the learning accessible for all learners, that microphone is really handy to be able to do that. So I can add in my text and then resize it. I can see some of you are joining the book. So hopefully you've had a chance to go through. You can also change your fonts, styles, and backgrounds just by tapping on the eye in the top right, and you can increase the size of it. You can change your font, so you can go through and select a different font that you might like to use. That's my alarm telling me I need to stop talking. And I can also go through and change things like the colors as well. If you want to change the background as well, you can see that there's so many different background pages, maths, handwritten lines, grid papers, etc. There is so much in Book Creator, and also you do have the ability to record audio directly. One way that I love to improve my well-being is to ensure that I set an alarm every hour to get up from my desk and move. And what this will do is it adds that audio recording in, as you can see here, that I can then play. And all of these books can be actually played and read aloud as well. So if you think about producing all of your teacher content for your learners to access, then they can do that as well. So it's just that nice way to be able to utilize it And then again in shapes, just something to note is that this now includes a whole range of different icons. So if you search for anything, it will come up with a whole different range of icons that you can use. So for example, I can just simply drag and drop it in and use that within. And you've also, one thing I didn't mention, there's the pen tool as well. So if you haven't had a chance to explore this in Book Creator, you've obviously got all of your normal pen tools that we have, but you've also got Google's auto draw. So this is actually built in directly, which means that if you're not a great drawer, then you can go through and start drawing. I'm going to go in with a book because I'm not a very good drawer, as you can see, and it'll start to sort of pick up what it is that you're trying to draw, and that's the one that I want to use. So again, you can either choose to go in via that book option or that auto draw. And one thing obviously children always love is those emojis as well. And I'm going to stop there, Rachel, because I'm terribly sorry for talking too much.
No, I think it was me that talked too much. Don't be silly. Thank you, Rachel. That was really interesting. I love Book Creator and Flipgrid and Edpuzzle. Everything that you shared was super great. If you want to, I recommend going in and having a go at the Book Creator link that Rachel popped in. Also, she gave you access to a Flipgrid that you can try as well. So maybe you need a rest after all this information, but maybe tomorrow or on the weekend, have a go and try out some of those things. I know for my students, they are a little bit obsessed with the comic strip on Book Creator because they used to use this iPad app that they loved, and we got rid of the iPads. So comic strips are fun if you want to try that out. So before we say farewell, I just wanted to share with you a couple of other events that we're running. Ooh, they're still there. So we at Joskos have wanted to help teachers during this time as much as we can. So for any teachers that are sort of struggling with Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, or they're just looking for other ideas or want a bit more information on things that we showed today, you're welcome to sign up for any of these drop-in sessions. And it's sort of literally Mark and I sitting on a Google Meet waiting for people to come in and have a chat with us. So you're welcome to join any of those. We also run sessions every week during January on Microsoft Teams and on Google Classroom. So these ones are more of a actual training session where we jump into the tools and go through it specifically in these in the online platforms. So you're welcome to sign up for those, although I get the feeling that most of you on the call have probably already been using those, which is great, but maybe you could share it with some other colleagues because they're more of a sort of beginner level. I've also popped into the chat all the resources from today. We might even add a few too, because I don't think we have Book Creator or Edpuzzle there yet, so we'll add those. But the links in the chat, if you join that link, then you'll also get the slides, they're in there. Other resources we talked about are in there too. So please take advantage. And then the other thing to say is, well done. Thanks everyone for joining in. Mark has popped into the chat a link to a form. So if you fill that in, you'll receive a CPD certificate for today, a digital badge, but also what we'd really love is your feedback. So if you can pop in your feedback on there, that would be really appreciated. I know that Rachel and James, it would also be great for them to hear from you too. And there's an opportunity for you to just note down what things you might actually take away from today's session and apply for you and your students. Also, so that we can keep doing these free sessions for teachers, if you can sort of share this and other events that we're running with your teaching community online, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, then that will enable us to do more sessions like this and offer it out for free. So that is all from me. Thank you so much again for joining. I'm sorry we did run out of time for Q&A, but I've seen that people have been adding in questions and things and being answered in the chat. So that is all from me. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again to Rachel and to James.